Well, I'll just start by saying hello. Yeah, my name is Bradley James Lockhart, and I live in Bellingham, Washington, which is about an hour and a half north of Seattle, and 45 minutes south of Vancouver, British Columbia. And I guess I'll just start sharing screen because I'll launch right into the presentation here. Okay, so yeah, this is just a professional creative human is kind of the only word I can describe myself as because I do a lot of different things in the field. And so I kind of try not to limit myself as a graphic designer or product designer or surface designer or animator. Just a person that gets paid to come up with ideas and execute on those ideas. And I execute on my own ideas. I actually ran into my high school English teacher last night. My sister published her first book, and we went to a reading. And she showed up, surprised us both, and she's like, "What do you do for work?" And it's just like, it's a really hard thing to put into like a sentence, right? Like I'm not just like a janitor, I'm like, well, I have a lot of jobs. They're all in my field, but they're all, art related, right? So my main job at this time, anyhow, is called Lariat Creative. It's my sole proprietorship, basically client work, commission work. Anytime anyone hires me to do something, it kind of goes under that umbrella. So examples would be logo design, illustration, animation, things like that. I started a merchandise company about 6 years ago called Northwest Corner Goods. I had been making merch of my art for a few years and I was getting kind of burnt out. So I brought on my buddy Kevin. So it's a partnership between me and him. He helps out on production and fulfillment and bookkeeping, and I just keep designing stuff and getting copies of it made and selling it. We had a brick and mortar store for a few years. Now we just mostly do online and wholesale and consignment and things like that. And then I also teach. So I'm very part-time, definitely the smallest source of income for me, but I teach animation and illustration and typically just like general entrepreneurship at the university that I studied at, which is Western Washington University, a liberal arts college here in Bellingham, Washington. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about kind of my path because I guess it's a little unusual, and kind of how I got to be to this point where I'm self-employed and I have, multiple income streams and all that sort of thing. So I started with posters, and I saw a funny post on the Reddit not that long ago that someone was like, you guys share a lot of posters, but you're not actually going to make posters, right? And I'm like, I didn't want to get into it, but I'm like, I make a lot of posters. I know Art Chantry, that's all he ever did, and he got his work in the Louvre. So, posters can be your full-time job, but for me, it was like designed by necessity. Like, I started playing music when I was a teenager, and my shows needed posters. So I got like a pirated version of Photoshop. I think Photoshop like 6 or 7. This would have been, the 1990s. Downloaded some illegible fonts and started telling people about these events. And I called it the gateway drug to graphic design because I didn't even know what graphic design was until I was in my 20s. And technically I'd been kind of putting images and type together for a while already. Of course, they were the wrong resolution. And I was doing them on like 8.5 by 11 rather than, 11 by 17 tabloid size. So I didn't know what I was doing, but it had to get done. And so I did it. And the more I did it, kind of the better I got. And eventually in my early 20s, people started paying me money to design posters, like other bands, venues in my hometown. And that was like my first taste in like someone paying me money to do art in any way, right? I didn't get paid very much. It was like I put $1. At first I typed $3 signs and then I erased 2 of them because I was like, I'm pretty sure it was like $20. This was like 2004 or 5 or whatever. And the shows didn't make a lot of money. So of course the posters didn't have a huge budget, but I started getting a little better at type, a little better at color, but I really wasn't confident in my ability to illustrate. So I call this kind of like my Photoshop collage style, where I'm just kind of like piecing things together that I find online or in newspapers or magazines, things like that. When the music that I was playing started to kind of slow down, I realized, oh, graphic design exists. I can get a degree in it, and I've already been doing it for like 6 years. So I went back to college. I got a degree, just a general bachelor's degree in graphic design with a little emphasis in new media, which meant that I just took a few more like animation and video classes than most designers. But what it really helped me learn was vector illustration. So I had always been like, the Photoshop collage kind of guy, not really comfortable with the pen tool or Pathfinder or anything like that. But, my hand was kind of forced while I was in school to start kind of illustrating things. So my posters in turn started becoming more vector, more original characters that I just kind of got to come up with myself rather than rely on things, that I found online. And that did really affect the future of my work. And I'm still doing it today. So, I mean, I graduated in 2011. And so 15 years later, I'm still designing posters. And that's kind of a theme of what I'm going to talk about is that, like, I don't really ever leave anything behind. Like, once I get good at something, instead of like moving on to the next thing, I kind of put it as like a tool in my tool belt that I can use on the next project. Again, my posters are very character driven. The budgets still aren't great, except, sometimes they are. Like, so this poster on the far right, I found a copy of it, framed version of it here. And this was an official game day poster for the Seattle Seahawks, screen printed by hand in 5 colors and, hundreds of copies mailed out. So while the majority of posters are, I like to call them extremely temporary because they have like an expiration date printed on them, at which point they kind of become like a souvenir. But some of them can be more valuable, become kind of like art pieces that you pass down and frame and things like that. But also posters for me have taken like kind of crazy, unexpected twists and turns. I say sometimes they have unpredictable power. This is one example of that. I designed a poster for an event in my hometown that was a hip hop producer from Atlanta, was flying out to perform a set. And he didn't really do a lot of live stuff. He was mostly a producer, so he didn't really get a lot of art made for him. So when I got tapped to design this poster, he saw it and he loved it. Loved it so much that he commissioned this diamond and gold, pennant version of the graphic that I cooked up for the poster that he wears like every day and in every session that he's in with like Gucci Mane and Young Thug and all these like rappers from that area. And this is kind of like a cautionary tale a little bit because like I couldn't think of a good H1 like headline font. So I just like scribbled, that's just my handwriting. And then that's my handwriting scribbled in diamonds forever. And then it took another weird turn where I started getting targeted, marketed knockoff versions of the pennant of the poster that I designed. So I reported it, got it taken down, but not before I ordered one of my very own. So now I have this ridiculously strange turn of event product of my own making. So in addition to posters, again, that's just, tool in the tool belt. I have kind of become known as a logo designer, at least, locally and in my community and in the Pacific Northwest, I suppose. And like I was saying about posters, how they feel very temporary and they have an expiration date. Like what I love about logos is that they do not. They could be with a company forever. I mean, the person that owns that company could open that truck and it's got that decal on there and it's literally something they see every day. So I love that kind of like power, and I love the thought that you have to invest in them. And really, my skill in this came from that moment of like being more brave to get better at vector, because if you've ever designed a logo, 99.9% of the time they need to be vector. They need to be scalable. They want an EPS, they want an SVG, they want an AI file. So I'm glad that I, went back to school and didn't just stick doing posters on my own, because this is a whole new thing that's a big part of who I am. And I do logos large and small. A lot of these are for my local community, but also it kind of scales up. It's funny. You can see a logo I did for my neighborhood, and then for my city, and then for my county, and then for my state, and then for another state, so they kind of like start small and kind of trickle off as people kind of see your work and trust you more. But I kind of consider myself like I'm not really above anything. And I think everyone deserves good design. And for me, I just like, if I have the time, then I will do it. And if I feel like I'm not selling myself short, I'll make it happen. And this is like kind of a perfect example of that. A few years ago, like simultaneously, I was rebranding like a pretty big multi-million-dollar seafood company, and at the exact same time branding a literal popsicle stand. So like a popsicle stand sometimes is like a cliche that we use for something cheap. But this was like a guy that rode a bicycle around with a cooler and sold popsicles to people in the park. And he was like, I just got this idea for this screaming ice cream cone that kind of looks like the symbol from this like old skate brand. And I was like, you know what? That sounds like fun. I want to do that. So, the budget for the ice cream cone was tens of dollars. Well, the budget for the seafood company was tens of thousands of dollars. And like both situations, I was doing them by myself. I'm my own studio, so I get all the money, but I also have to do everything. I had to design the brand guide, I had to do packaging, I had to do animation, I had to do. I mean, I spent a month just on the logo. So it's just kind of crazy those kind of scales. But for me, it's like I see myself as like if I have the time and if it's something I want to do, then I'll do it. So yeah, I mentioned packaging for the last project. I've got to do more kind of illustration packaging. I'm in my office right now where I have examples of all this stuff. So like here's this box and it was for a collection of Washington State beer. We have a huge craft beer culture here, as I'm sure you guys do wherever you live in America. We also have a huge seafood culture here. So this illustration on the right was for a box of smoked salmon. I have the box here. It's like the kind you would see for sale at the airport or whatever as like a gift. If you ever visited Seattle, you would definitely be able to buy this at the airport. I know they sell it at the state capitol, which is kind of crazy. But I spent so much time on that fish that I was like, I think I want to try something. So what I did is I sent them an updated version of the contract where I was like, you know what? I want to retain merch rights to this illustration. And this is not something you can do every time, especially if someone like the seafood company, the big seafood company would have said no. But this one product for this other seafood company was like, okay, because they're not in the business of selling T-shirts. They're in the business of selling smoked salmon. So they didn't care that I turned it into a print and a sticker and a magnet. And I even found one of the old T-shirt, like screen printed T-shirts. So if you make something like really brilliant, it's like you did it. Like it was your idea. It was your craft. And like, granted, they paid you to make it, but consider the option of monetizing it additionally. So for me, the budget for that seafood wasn't huge. I think it was $1,000, but I've made fives of thousands of dollars since then off of creating merch of that key art that I made. I use lots of different vendors, but one thing, if you want to dip your toes into this, is Printful, which is a print on demand products. So you don't have to have anything made. They print it and ship it for you, and you just like mark it up. So with the paper print, I'll mark it up like 10, $15, and I don't have to do anything, which is great. I've probably sold 50 of those. Another weird like merch world that I've kind of dipped into is bandanas. So I noticed probably like 8 years ago, a bunch of my favorite artists were selling bandanas, like with their illustrations. So I was like, I think I could do that. So I kind of tried my hand at my first bandana, which was themed after my city. It had like little icons of like beer and bicycles and wildlife and music and things that we're known for. And from there, I got to do more and more. And I would just kind of like pitch it to clients like, if, hey, you want me to design some custom merch for you, we could do a bandana, things like that. And with the success of the one that was based on my city, I was like, well, what if I scaled this up to my state, to Washington State? What would that look like? So I came up with this idea of what I called the Evergreen Bandana Game. And it wasn't a game initially. Initially, it was just like a kind of a cool map of Washington State with a bunch of our like iconic creatures and wildlife like Mount St. Helens and what else we got in there? Mount Rainier, Puget Sound, things like that. Here's a copy of it here. But my business partner, who's a big gamer, was like, well, what if it was also a board game? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, it's got a grid. It's got art. Like, what if we made this art interactive? So we kind of come up with this simple rules, made it like a Chutes and Ladders, Candyland kind of combination. But it used a lot of inside jokes about Washington State and facts. It's like educational. We came up with some cool packaging. So it's a cloth bag that can fit in your pocket. You can take it on a hike, a camping trip. Everything's waterproof. So it seemed like a good idea. And so it also seemed like a really good idea for Kickstarter. So if you've never done any kind of creative project on Kickstarter, I recommend it. I've done like 5, I think now, and they've all been successful. But it's a great way to test the waters on, an idea that you might have. So we set our goal at $2,500, which was pretty modest. We ended up getting 25,000, which covered, 1,000 games getting made, basically. We came up with additional rewards, which was basically just like little pieces of the design pulled out into, again, little pieces of merch. One of which was this golden Bigfoot pin. I've just got random copies of things here. There it is. And this is one of the most popular pieces of merch I've ever made. I've reprinted probably like 1,000 of these things. And I see people like at restaurants wearing them. And I'm like, hey, I made your pin. Where'd you get it? And they're like, oh, someone gave it to me or whatever. And I don't have time to explain to them like, well, that's a character from a bandana. That's actually a board game. I just go, I'm happy you like it, because it's just one of those things that you can't really explain quickly. But able to pull little pieces of my own art, turn it into little pieces of merch, and to kind of spread the word. It's fun that we all kind of connected via Reddit. Is that like I like to share my work on Reddit. That's how I got invited to do this talk. And I don't like to spam people, but if it's something that I think that they would think is unique and that they would like, then I just kind of put a post up. So I put a post up on Seattle Reddit, which is like the biggest Pacific Northwest Reddit community. And it didn't get like a million likes or comments or anything, but someone from a TV show, a local news station, saw it and then was like, we'll do a story. And so that's something that I learned is that like news stations use Reddit for leads for news stories. And so this has happened for me. Like it's worked out for a few times. So whenever they aired this story and they re-aired it like 4 times, I would like open my phone and I'm like, why do I have 90 emails? And I'm like, oh, they must have re-aired that story and I just sold, 90 more bandana games. So yeah, Reddit is kind of a secret weapon for me in terms of like press. Here's another completely different creative project that I did. I'm mostly sharing ones with you guys that are like my own personal ones, not client pieces. But I made a series of country music patches, completely unrelated to everything else I've talked about. But the theme is kind of similar, whereas like create missing pieces. So I wanted a patch that was themed around one of my favorite country singers, Townes Van Zandt. And I went on Etsy, and this was the only one I could find, this one on the left. And I'm like, I still bought it, and I actually have it on my jacket. But I was like, it's kind of generic. Like, it's just a guitar. Like, you could put any Neil Young lyrics in there, and it would work. I was like, what if you made something that was more specific? So I picked one of his songs, Waiting Around to Die, and I made a gravestone. And I was like, okay, that's more specific. And then when I did that, I just kind of like tumbled into designing like 20 more. So I just came up with all these little clips of mostly song titles, sometimes lyrics from songs, and just decided like what would they look like if they were a logo or a badge, I guess more of a badge than a logo. Like what would they we know what they sound like, but what would they look like? So I came up with all these patches. This is the most popular one. Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys. And I did like an art show where I made wooden sign versions. I think I've got some floating around my office. And then I started making patches and I put them on Etsy. And it was my number one source of income last year, even though this was 6 years ago. So it was something that like I made because I just like, it felt like it wasn't there. And so once I put one there, I put more and more and more there and they all kind of like snowballed. And I'd never had an Etsy before. And now I have several since then, but sell them retail on Etsy. I sell them wholesale on the website Fair, which is where like local stores go to buy products. And then about 2 years ago, there was this really weird thing in America where people started doing hat bars where they'll bring like a bunch of blank trucker hats to like a rodeo or a county fair and then like a box of patches and you like pick out your patches and you heat press the patches on. There's literally like 1,000 of these in America now. And so my patches became super popular with these people to the point that tens of thousands of them were actually ripped off and sold on Temu, which was frustrating. But yeah, this is the kind of thing that like I would have never thought would ever happen. But again, I just made a missing piece and it kind of filled into a spot and then it kind of snowballed from there. I'm going to talk a little bit about flags. Again, we're just going in random directions, but another theme, which is like missing pieces of design. So this is a lot of people ask me like, how did you design the flag of your city? Why did you design it? How did you get it adopted? So this is kind of like just a quick general story of that. I used the same process to design it that I use to design most things, which is just research is a great way to start, right? So there's a book called Good Flag, Bad Flag, written by the North American Vexillological Association, which is a group of like flag geniuses. I'm going to their national conference in like 2 weeks. I watched a TED Talk by Roman Mars. If you guys haven't heard of Roman Mars, he's like an amazing podcast host for 99% Invisible. All things design related, and he loves flags, particularly city flags. And then I went out and found some that I liked that were kind of newer. Of course, I looked around my community and tried to get sources of inspiration. We have a flag called the Cascadia flag that's been around for about 30 years. That's unofficial, but super popular. I looked at this Aaron Draplin poster. A lot of you designers have probably heard of him. I met him that year, and he gave me a copy of that poster. And then just even boring stuff like highway signs and logos and the college logo and just come up with an idea for like general color palette and shapes. did thumbnail sketches, as I'm sure you guys are all familiar with. I am, one of those people that carries with me just like a little notebook everywhere I go. That's one of the tenets of good flag design is it should be able to fit in a 1 by 1.5 inch square and be like simple. So I just kind of drew a bunch of those over and over again, built it in Illustrator so I could tweak the colors and the shapes, got some critique from people I was working with at the time, and I finally completed my idea, my design. And what's more important than what a flag looks like is what it represents. So the blue is for our bay here in our city. The two stars are for our two indigenous tribes, and the wave is a symbol of an indigenous place name. And then the four stripes are for our four original towns that came together to form our city. So everything has kind of, important meaning. This flag was not endorsed by the city government whatsoever. This was a complete, like, separate effort from a arts organization. So they had a contest, and I designed my flag and I put it in the contest. They got like 10, and eventually they picked me as the winner. So we sewed a copy of it, we raised it at a night market, showed it off. But again, it wasn't real. It was just kind of an idea. But we started with stickers, printed like 30, 40. No, actually, I think it was probably more like 200 that we gave away that night, or maybe sold for a couple bucks. Then I started printing more and more as more and more people wanted them. And I put the words on there because no one knew what the symbol meant. So I had to like literally label it like Bellingham, Washington. Ended up printing like tens of thousands of these stickers. And then I turned to Kickstarter. So this was actually before the bandana game, but this was, I think, maybe my first Kickstarter. And because people wanted flags, they saw it and they were like, well, I want one for my house or my business. I had to order at least 50 to get them printed. And I was like, I don't want to order 50 and only sell two, right? So I did a pre-order thing through the Kickstarter, ended up selling a couple hundred. Roman Mars bought 3, promoted it out, which was awesome. Not by chance. I mean, I emailed him, so that's a good advice there. Like if you have a big person that you're looking up to or you're inspired by, especially if you're doing a personal project, like just share it with them. And it's likely that they will reply to you, or they might even help promote it for you. So I mailed out these couple hundred flags. People started sending me photos of them in like amazing, inspiring places, like the summits of mountains and up in Prince William Sound, Alaska, flying from boats. Local people started like painting murals and even erecting. This was like the CEO of the company I worked for at the time got wind of the project and got really excited. So he erected this like giant metal, like kind of push pin statue. So this was all before it was official, by the way. This is just still when people are just liking the idea and kind of wanting to promote it. All flags are public domain symbols. That might be something that not everyone knows, but they're never ever owned by anyone. They're always owned by everyone. So even though mine wasn't real yet, I wanted it to be real, so I dedicated it to the public domain via a letter to the city attorney, and then I let other people use it. So grocery stores, breweries, skateboard companies, things like that. I called it like co-branding to just kind of help seed the symbol into the public consciousness. People started getting tattoos of it right away, which I was kind of nervous about because it wasn't real yet. But I mean, it was their skin, not mine. So I was like, go for it. So with all of that kind of building, I'd kind of reached out to a few city council members. Some of them were really supportive and some of them were a little iffy. But they had me come in and give a presentation about what the symbol meant. And at the time, there was 50 different cities working on new city flags, mostly inspired by Roman Mars. Since then, it's been over 2,000. I think it might be getting close to 3,000, which is insane. New city flags in America. So they were like pretty supportive, but they were like nervous that I had used these symbols to represent our indigenous groups because they have their own government and they have their own like council. So I had to go to them. So I went to the Lummi and the Nooksack and got approval letters and resolutions from them. So then I went back to the city, and then the flag was officially adopted by the government. 2017, about 2 years after I had come up with the idea, or not come up with the idea, but come up with my version of the idea. And ever since then, I mean, you can't throw a rock in this city without seeing one, without hitting one. Rather, it's been baked into cookies, crocheted into Chihuahua capes, woven into circular, like I think that's a frisbee or something. Just like constantly getting used by different people in different ways. City buses, magazines, notebooks, record fairs, anything and everything. This is what I call trash flag. It's kind of ridiculous because the like grimier, the garbage truck gets. Like sludge will be like pouring over it, which, maybe would stress some people out. But what I love about this is that, like, if you go to any city in America, Spokane, Washington, or Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, you're most likely going to see a garbage truck with like the graphic of an American flag on it, like, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But what's amazing about what we have now is like we have our own personal version of that with symbols that like teach you about where you live and like make you proud of where you live. So like even a garbage truck could use it in a cool way. And that was, at this point 10 years ago since I designed it, but I'm always getting surprised with new ways it's being used. I just spotted this the other day at a new Trader Joe's that opened in Bellingham, and they kind of stuck the flag into the type, which was neat. From that project, like people at the city government like learned that I exist and kind of trusted me. So I get to do quite a bit of work for the city government. And the first thing that I did was redesign the city seal. So they had actually hired an agency, paid them 20, 30 grand to redesign the seal. And then when the people of the city saw it and didn't like it, the whole project was scrapped, which I learned a lot about that happening when it comes to city government and like public pushback and outcry. So they were like, could you just try and like just clean it up was basically what I had to do. So I had a version of the flag that I didn't show anyone that I'm calling the secret flag. But I was like, I think it could kind of just fit into that shape. And then I could replace the bullets, the typographic bullets, with those four-sided stars. And then I could update the font, not dramatically. I think it's Optima on the left, and I made it cabin bold on the right, which is like, it's still a humanist sans serif, but it's just a little more modern. And they bought it, and no one told them not to do it, or the public didn't get mad about it. So now this is like one of the most used pieces of design I've ever made. I mean, it's on every truck, every parking ticket, every garbage can. Like I see this every day. But what I love about it is the way that the flag and the seal like fit together, like because it's the hex codes are exactly the same. Even the scale of the stars are the same, and they can like live together next to each other on like Wikipedia forever and ever. Amen. So since the flag of Bellingham, I've kind of tripped and fallen into more flag projects. Primarily I made a pride version of our flag that's really popular. I redesigned the state flag of my state just for fun because our state flag is terrible. I've entered a couple like local city contests. I've helped out on at least half a dozen other cities that like found mine and were like, how did you do this? And do you have advice for that? And so I kind of help advise people. I've done a few for Seattle. One was published in the Seattle Times, which is the Emerald. And then the other one is this orca face, is what I call it. And I could spend 45 minutes talking about orca face, but I'm not going to do that. It was for an unofficial contest for a city flag for Seattle. It was actually disqualified from the contest, kicked out. But it didn't really matter because people loved it. So this is another just like an unexpectedly popular piece of design that I've created. During the pandemic, I made masks that like I sold thousands of them. I made a pride version of the orca face. Of course, I made a patch because I make patches. And then more recently, a hockey team in Seattle called the Yacht Flippers. Not sure if you guys are familiar with the idea of orca whales destroying boats, but it was happening for a while. So this hockey team named themselves that, and they wanted to use it. So it's on their hockey pucks and their jerseys. I think I've got one here somewhere. Yeah. Yeah, whenever somebody like asks me for something like that, I'm like, yeah, go for it. Just send me one. So I've got my own Yacht Flippers jersey, which is pretty sweet. Orca face, it's ridiculous, but it just works. Okay, so in addition to making art, something that I pride myself in is making art move. If you're going to take the time to create, obviously you guys have seen I like to make characters. Why not learn how to make a move a little bit? So a big part of my work is motion graphics and animation. It's going to be about 80% of my income this year, I would say. And the work varies from project to project, but a lot of maybe if you guys know much about motion or studied motion, some of them are more typical projects like explainer videos, which just either break down technology or products and are much more like kind of corporate. I do actually a lot of work in documentary films. There's a documentary film company here in my hometown that I do contract work for. And so I've worked on in like half a dozen of their films. And it's just like, making photographs kind of come to life or animating newspaper headlines or animating infographics, things like that. I'm lucky to know some really brilliant children's book authors. So I've gotten to work on a handful of animated trailers for those authors' books. So they're kind of like little mini cartoons where we pull the artwork from the page, layer it out, and just kind of like bring the characters to life a little bit. Music videos, of course. I mean, the theme of like my whole design career is kind of music, right? Music has kind of like forced me into doing things. I made a music video before I ever got a professional job in motion, but it made me able to prove that I knew how to do it and that I could do it. Of course, animating a logo, I like to call it, would you like fries with that? So if I'm going to design a logo for someone in the bid at the very bottom, I'll be like, oh, if you would like an animated version of this logo, it will be an extra $1,000 sometimes. I mean, it depends on the client, of course, but half the time they say yes. So why not try, right? And then I've worked on a lot of educational kind of science films for like the Nature Conservancy, like the kind of thing that you would watch in your high school when you were a kid that teaches you about climate change, things like that. So I've worked on a few videos like that. Finally, this is the final slide, which I'm calling Leave Nothing Behind. This is the post that I did on Reddit that I think Steve or someone saw that was the reason I was invited to speak today. And I think what I tapped into here was like, hey, here's this cool, piece of graphic. You can call it a mascot, whatever you want to call it, illustration. It's definitely not a logo. It's too detailed, but here's a piece of art I made for a music festival. Oh, and here's all the way that it was used and that I made sure it was used correctly for the music festival. So obviously, because I've learned that people love bandanas. I've got the very last copy here. Let's make a bandana. I learned that people love enamel pins, from the Bigfoot pin. Let's make an enamel pin. I understand that people love beer. Everyone knows that, but I was able to lay it out correctly with, colors that complemented it. I know people love various kinds of merch. And so in wrapping up, it's like the tool belt that I talked about earlier. It's like all these things that you learn either by necessity or professionally or just for fun. It's like, don't get rid of them. Like keep them there. And if you can find a way to showcase them without your website looking like mine, which is like entirely too many projects, it just makes you like more valuable, more memorable, and you'll just always have a bigger impact on your clients. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing.
That is awesome. Yeah, there's so much to talk about. One question I wanted to ask you, but thank you so much. That's so cool, Bradley.
Yeah.
Is it seems like you're not afraid to seek publicity for your work, and obviously it's helped you. So is that something you were always comfortable with? And or talk a little bit about that and how
Yeah.
you grew potentially to be more comfortable doing that.
That's a good question. Yeah, I've never been shy, obviously. Did theater as a kid. I think playing music, again, like everything in my life comes back to playing music. Like being a lead singer of a band, even when I was a teenager, I was talking to local arts magazines and things like that. Yeah, I've never really shied away from press. I mean, I've had bad press.
Oh yeah, like
I,
what?
I, like The Stranger, like when I talked about the orca whale getting kicked out of the contest, Seattle's biggest music and arts magazine basically said that I was a terrible person, that I cheated at the contest when I didn't, and like it brought some negative attention. So, I mean, but that's like one in probably 50 articles that, have covered my work because not that 50 different national magazines, but there was a lot of people that talked about the flag when it got adopted, and so for the most part, it's positive. And so I suppose if I got a lot of negative press, I would be more gun shy about it. But again, I don't typically like contact news stations. I just use Reddit. And it's about finding the sub that makes sense. If you animated a cartoon and you put it on Cartoon Reddit, probably no one would see it. But if you put it on the Reddit of whatever the cartoon was themed around, like, so if it was like themed around the Beatles or something, if you put it on Beatles Reddit and you say, I made a cartoon about the Beatles, it would probably get like 1 million views. So that's one thing that I've learned and like one strategy I've used.
I have a question. I noticed looking through your portfolio that it seems very much more geared towards like showing rather than telling. Like there's not like a lot of like text describing your process or it's more just like here is the work. Do you feel like that's something that you like, did you used to have more sort of like explanation on your site that now you've sort of discovered that it's more effective to have less for people to read when they're on your portfolio?
Yeah, I think, yeah, because like my work is very visual. It's like kind of the opposite of people that are studying like interaction design, for instance, in, research and science and the science. Like mine is very, I don't want to say dumb, but it's kind of simple. So a lot of it kind of speaks for itself. Like I really don't have to overly talk about it, I suppose. But there was definitely a time when I would have, like when I first graduated, and my portfolio was like, here's a website that I made for a fake hair salon, especially when it's like not even real work. I mean, you really have to like sell yourself there, right? Like you have to talk about why you chose the pattern that's in the background and why you scaled the photography to the certain size to prove that you like put thought behind what you did. But I think at this point, my website isn't even really a good design website. Like a good design website would be like five projects that, like you're saying, is like a deep dive that talks about the research, shows the thumbnail sketches, shows the final product, shows how much money they made the people, right? And then I would have a big headline that says like, we are digital storytellers, you know, like that's the majority of design websites. But for me, mine is almost more like an archive of like, here are the things that I've done that I am proud of. And in some instances, here's a link to an article that was written about it. Or in some instances, here's a link to the website that it currently lives on. But yeah, I mostly use it to just kind of keep track of my stuff and not forget. But yeah, I mean, if like, cause I teach students, and so if my students are asking me like, should I put why? Yes, you should absolutely put why, especially if you don't have 200 projects to show off.
Yeah.
But at this
That
point
makes
for me, I don't really have to do that,
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine it would be really, really hard to read through a bunch of explanations for every single project too.
Right. And no one would. I mean, they wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Cool. So that makes sense. Cool. Thank you so much.
We've been promoting you for a few weeks now. So some people did send in questions. One of them is, do you ever have a dream client you'd love to work with? I would add like dream industry, any kind of area that you haven't worked in yet.
Yeah, that's a good question. I love pinball. I'm buying a new pinball machine in a couple weeks. And I remember when I first graduated from college, I emailed Stern. They're the biggest pinball machine maker in America. They're based in Chicago, Illinois. And I was like, hi, I'm graduating college and I would love to work for you. And they're like, great, send us your portfolio. And I was like, here it is. And they're like, you're not good enough to work for us. So I definitely wasn't at the time. Yeah, when my portfolio after college was horrendous. But I would love, because if you've ever played a pinball machine, it's like not only is there animation, which is a thing that I love, but there's just tons of illustration and design, and then there's even 3D, so there's like 3D printed objects that are animated, like physically animated in the real world. So it's like it's a lot of design kind of mixed together. So I've actually had the plan to design a pinball machine that I know a guy that builds custom ones, but that wouldn't be for real. That would be like a one version of something. But if I could like do graphics for like a new machine, that'd be amazing. Something I had in my presentation, but I cut out, which is that like work leads to work. And especially if you're slow, you make something, that missing piece, like I described, that you want to exist. And then a big company comes around and says, we love that thing that you made. Can you make that for us, but at scale, And like, I've found that actually has happened to me a handful of times in my life. So it's like, don't be afraid of the small stuff, because that's how you get the big stuff.
Thanks for sharing. And I would like to ask you, how do you keep track of that amount of projects and products that you've designed? And at the same time, if you could explain a bit more about the fundraising's website, how do you know when a project is worth it of?
How do I know if it's, well, there was a few questions. Let me try and move back. So, I did hire, like I said, when it came to the merch, I brought on a friend to help me, and I didn't pay him because I didn't have enough money, but I gave him equity. So, we co-own the company together, which that's a piece of advice. If you want to work with someone else, but you don't want to be on the hook, it's just like decide to share the business, right? And so he helps me keep track of inventory and shipping. We have about 150 little pieces of merch that we sell, 150 little things like this. Some of them are kind of big, but most of them are small, and they all fit in this office. But yeah, with Kickstarter, it's the brilliant part about Kickstarter is that it doesn't have to work. So sometimes it can just be an idea, and a lot of Kickstarters don't get funded, and like there's not I mean, maybe you feel bad about it at first, but that's the whole reason why you're using the website, is to find out if enough people out there like the idea enough for it to come true. A good question is like, when do I just order something, and then when do I kickstart it? And I think that there's probably just like a cost threshold. Like if I'm going to spend thousands of dollars to get a physical version of something that I'm not positive people are going to like, then I'll use Kickstarter, because then I can figure out, pre-order, finance, and get it all together. And then I'm not taking a ton of risk, if that makes sense. But if I just drew a new piece of art, and I'm going to order it as a sticker, I can get stickers printed here in my town for 50 cents a piece, and so I can order 100 of them. So I'm only out $50. And stickers retail for $4 nowadays. So I only have to sell 10, 12 to make the money back. So I guess it's just like, what's the risk and what's the threshold of ordering that thing? And I just kind of go from there.
Thank you. You made it very clear. Thank
Okay,
you.
cool.
How do you balance your personal style or preferences with the need of a specific client or project?
Sometimes I don't, sometimes I do, like at this point, if you click on my website and you click logo, like that page that I showed in my presentation, I have a style that's kind of established. It's characters, it's colorful. Sometimes it's just custom type, custom letters. So when people come to me, like they kind of know what they're going to get. Also, I will do anything. I mean, I will work for anyone. So like earlier this year, I branded a person that was a specialist in hospital helicopters. So I had to design this kind of like helicopter looking, like modern sharp wing, logo. So I'm not like above changing my style. Like I think sometimes you do have to be somewhat of a chameleon. Like this is your job, don't do anything immoral, don't make anything that, and don't make anything that's just like so disgusting that you lose sleep at night. But I think it's okay to swing between clean and modern and, crunchy and retro and like somewhere in between.
Got it. And let me follow up a little bit. Are there projects that you've done that are a little more corporate or a little less visually interesting, or maybe were less personally interesting to you that you don't show on your site?
1000%. So the vast majority of my income this year has been for an agency that was hired by a multi-billion-dollar company, and I did, months of work for them that I'm not even legally allowed to show anyone. So I had to sign a thing that said I will never ever put this on the internet. But even if I could, I don't know if I would, because it was pretty boring stuff. So not everything is exciting and funny and cute and colorful. A lot of your work is mundane and boring, but you got to buy cat food, like the money has to come from somewhere. And so you get those big swells of kind of more corporate, clean, again, not immoral. Like I'm never going to do any work for anyone that's doing anything that I don't politically or ethically agree with. However, I will help people sell their products in order to get money, in order to make the fun stuff, in order to animate the cartoons that no one is paying me to animate, in order to bankroll the piece of merch that I'm not sure if anyone's going to buy. So it's a give and take relationship. And you're constantly doing work that's not necessarily seen by people, but again, it pays your mortgage. So
good advice. Any more questions? Anyone want to jump in?
I just had a quick question. How many projects do you think you kind of tackle at once? Like, are you somebody who has like a bunch of different things that you're working on at once? You kind of like, you maybe, for lack of a better term, like hit a wall with one thing. So like, okay, I'm going to go work on something else for a bit. Like, how many do you juggle, if at all?
a lot of the things, they take like rounds of revisions and review. So a lot of the times they'll overlap each other. I try not to like work on any more than 2 in the same day. I think because my brain could just kind of like split in half, right? But in terms of like those jobs that I showed you at the beginning, like there are days where I'll do all 3. I mean, there are days where I will make a revision to a logo, I will order a new patch, and I will do prep for my Western class. So I try not to have too many days like that, but it does happen. But I would say like the average, I use Asana. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. Some of you, it's task management software. I make a little, list of what I'm working on. I give myself little deadlines. And a lot of the times there'll be 2 or 3 going on at the same time. So yeah, I would say 2 or 3 is the average.
Somebody asked, what advice would you give your younger self, especially in regard to creative inspiration?
Well, I mean, my first job that I took outside of college, I stayed in it way too long. I stayed in it for 2 years when I should have walked away after like, I don't know, 3 months. I tapped out really quick. I moved to a new city for it. So that was kind of, I mean, I don't regret that. I didn't want to kind of just like stick around and stick to my same routine. So I'm proud that I moved, but I regret myself doing that job for 2 years because I basically maxed out at my experience and money within like a few months. I remember I walked into my boss's office and I was like, so what's the job above mine? And she's like, I'm sorry. I'm like, what's the next good job I can get here? And she was like, well, you could become a salesman. I was like, I just got 2 degrees in graphic design, so I'm not going to become a salesman. Sorry. So that's a regret. But I eventually went freelance. Happy ending, But in terms of like inspiration, gosh, I suppose I would just like maybe broaden my horizons, try and consume more media. And like, I mean, I listen to a lot of country music and a lot of metal. Maybe I should try and, listen to different music, watch different movies. Being a teacher does help me out on that. Like I'm surrounded by, 21-year-olds. And like yesterday I asked them what their favorite animated movie was and I hadn't heard of half of them. So now I've got a list of things where I'm like, okay, I should try and, not just be as curmudgeon-y and snobby and try and let other, new stuff into my brain because that's how you make good stuff and not just repeat yourself over and over again.
I have a quick question about kind of at what point you found this threshold of, because you, like you put it, you have this specific style and you're really, really good at it and really established at it and people come to you for it. I'm feeling myself moving in that direction where I have a portfolio of like a lot of like clean corporate stuff, but like also someone recently, like a creative director saw kind of like more freelance and like personal stuff or like more like esoteric, like quote unquote my style kind of things. And he was like, I can tell this is like what you're really good at and what you really enjoy. And not that your like corporate work is bad because you're following the directions, you're following the brand guidelines, you're solid at it. My question is kind of, at what point did you realize, okay, I'm good enough or like I have the confidence to move into becoming freelance and focusing on my quote unquote my style of work and finding clients that way and finding people to hire me for that kind of work?
I think it's like, it was like not even like a decision I did, or it wasn't even like a moment or a decision. It was like necessity. So I had tapped out at the job that I was describing just now and I quit and I lied to them and I said that I had a better job when I didn't. I just was burnt out from that. So that's when I started Lariat Creative. So that would have been like 2013, and like, okay, everything I do freelance will be under this umbrella. And it started very slow. It started with posters and then slowly a logo would show up and then slowly and then an animated video, would trickle in and things like that. So it took a long time and it took me kind of like, one thing I've never been afraid to do is show my work. That's like, I know that can be hard, especially for like students, particularly like I just can't want to show it. I'm like, you just got to show it. And like the more you put it out there, the more it'll get like pinned on Pinterest boards and the more it'll get, reposted on Instagram. And like eventually that does come back to help. So I've always shown it off. I've always built it up. But again, like I still do sometimes do the corporate thing. So it's like, it's not all wine and roses, some of it is a little bit more sterile. But I also try and find comfort and joy in that, in the limitations, in the boring stuff. I mean, it's easier when you're not doing it all the time, of course, but like sometimes when I'm like, ooh, I get to do something that's just like sharp and smooth and clean, and it's actually kind of fun for me because so much of my work is crunchy and detailed and, colorful. Yeah, and there was never really like a tipping point, but I guess my advice again is to just like, don't be afraid to show it off. And like, I think some point a design professor or someone told me something that was like, put the work in your portfolio that you want to do. And that kind of stuck with me. I was like, okay, like I want to make logos. I want to make posters. I will put that in there. And like, if you guys have noticed, like there's not a single piece of web design or app design or anything like that on my website because I don't like doing that. You could even have multiple websites. You don't have to have one. Like you could have a website that's just all the really cool, really weird, fun stuff that you love to do and call it whatever company you want to call it. And then put all the clean, simple, corporate, safe stuff here. And then like maybe just have both out there. And who knows, like it's like putting 2 fishing poles in the water instead of one.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Did you or would you ever consider creating an alternate brand and maybe splitting up different styles, different types of clients into 2 different sites?
Yeah, I've been honestly thinking really hard right now about making a website that's just for motion graphics for documentaries. Because I've been getting tapped so much for that lately. And it's something that no one in school ever told me about, but every single documentary movie you've ever seen has like a photo that like comes to life through parallax, or it has a simple animated, recreation of a scene. And there's like really not a lot of agencies that like specialize in that. I mean, there are animation agencies that do it, but I've been like doing so much lately. I'm just like, what if I just made a website that's like documentarymotiongraphics.com and I just threw up, 12 or so examples that I've worked on and make it more of the kind of website that I was making fun of earlier, but it's the one that is how you actually get big clients, where you do case studies, do testimonials, show people that get pull quotes from people that worked with you, and build little pages for every project. And like, I'm seriously considering that because it's like it is like a really fun world, and I'm enjoying it. And I don't know how much longer I'm going to have this client, but what if I got the next Netflix one or something? Like that could really be something.
Any more questions? I have a couple more I can go to, but feel free to jump in, anyone.
Yeah, I had a question. I was kind of curious on, and this kind of piggybacks off of what we were just talking about, is I know on your like main splash page it said like, I'm just a creative person. Like I don't believe in like limiting myself in a box either. And I was just curious on how you were talking about possibly doing different websites. Like, have you had clients who have been like, oh, like you can do everything? Sure. Have you gotten anyone who's like a little bit like pessimistic or like a little bit like unsure about like hiring you for like an illustration job when they're like, well, don't you want to like animate this or be making a bandana or something?
I mean, like they're like thinking that I would get too bored to do what they wanted me to do. Is that what you're asking?
No, I mean, not really. I mean, I guess I'd just say, like, have you ever had any times where, like, maybe a client's been like, hey, like, I see that you did this, but we want to do this, and we're not sure. Would you be comfortable with that? Like, I'm just curious about how you kind of, like, negotiate going through things with people, like, when you're showing them a portfolio. Like, is it ever overwhelming to a client to be like, we just wanted you to do a logo and now you're showing us bandanas?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess the answer is that I wouldn't typically show them bandanas if they just wanted me to do a logo, but a lot of times people write me and they are a little nervous in terms of like, is this something that you want to do? Like they are a little apprehensive because sometimes it's people that I've like met through professional stuff. And they've seen some of the more glamorous, front page type work, and they do want me to do something that's mundane, And I like I said, I typically almost do everything. I did quit a job this year that was for a hardware store that wanted me to illustrate a map that went on the ground of the hardware store, so you could like find your way around the hardware store. And at first I was like, this is so utilitarian and weird, and I'll never ever get to do this sort of thing again, so I'm definitely going to do it. And then as soon as I started, like the communications were bad, the requirements were weird, the budget was terrible, and I was like, I'm sorry. And so I just said, I am too busy to help you, even though I was not too busy to help them. But then, of course, hopefully they went and found somebody else to do the thing. So yeah, there are points when things I thought were maybe going to be sexier became so unsexy that I did have to just not do it because I was like, this is, oh man, it's going to drive me nuts. But again, like for the most part, I will work for anyone and everyone, especially if it only takes me a couple hours. If it's weeks, then I'll really kind of maybe think more about whether or not I want to do it. But I try to do as much as I can.
And then I have another question too, that if that's okay. You're doing all of your work solo, 100% you. You're not doing any contracts with anyone. You don't have any employees, et cetera, right?
I don't have any employees. I did hire my first intern last summer, which was a former student of mine. She emailed me and was like, I'm cleaning boats this summer. Do you know of any creative work? And I was getting all these projects. So I was like, you work for me. So we worked on like 4 logos and 1 animated video, but that's the first time I've ever hired an intern. If I have like a 3-minute animated video I need to make, then I have people I'll tap to help me like illustrate the backgrounds.
Cool. No, that's awesome.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Blake. Anybody else?
I have a quick question. Sorry. Just to kind of piggyback off of Blake's first question, like, have there been instances where you've been showing your work to a client that you really wanted to work with, or that you were pitching for a job that you wanted to do, and it was kind of a stretch for you, and you kind of had to like convince whoever it is that you were working with or trying to work with, rather, that you could do the work that they were asking for?
Like try to convince them, like, maybe I don't have proof I can do this, but I promise I can do it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The first video that I animated for the Nature Conservancy, I guess technically I've only done one. I did other nature videos after that, but it was like the first time I got like more than 5-figure budget, to work on something like that. And previously I had mostly animated videos of that kind for myself. So like I'd made myself music videos and I made myself like funny little videos, and I'd done it on teams. So like I worked at a tech company for a while, and we actually came up with like a cartoon show. And so I had help. We worked on like 3 pilot episodes of this cartoon show. But like that was the first time where it's like, this big company wants you to make this thing, and there's this big a budget. And I mean, I had all these little pieces that I could be like, look, I know how to storyboard. I know how to illustrate. I know how to animate. I know how to edit music. I know how to edit audio. But like, I guess I didn't have like something to just show them, to prove to them that I could do exactly what they wanted me to do. I did do it, and it did work out, but it was hard. And it was like one of the hardest things I'd ever done in terms of like the amount of changes and feedback and meetings. I mean, like 30 meetings, like it was a lot. But once I finished that, then boom, that goes on the top of the website. And then the next time the next nature company comes around, I made that thing that I can in fact do it again, and it will be better because all of the things that I learned not to do, I'll do differently.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. We've got another one here, actually. What do you think you'd be doing if you didn't have your current job?
Oh man, that's a very fun general question. What would I be doing if I like wasn't doing graphic design? I honestly asked this because like most people on the earth like don't do the same job their whole life. I mean, maybe like my parents' generation they did, but the majority of people like do different jobs, right? I quit design for a while and just straight up worked at a bar and was like doorman. But of course I was like doing posters, and playing lots of music. Obviously it would have been amazing to be a professional musician. I still play music. I've played music since I was 15 and I'm 40. So if I wasn't doing design, maybe I would have more time for that. I definitely wanted to be a director when I was a teenager. Like I wanted to direct movies, but I never really saw that through. But now I'm lucky, like weirdly through graphic design, to get to work on movies. I've worked on like 12, but they're all, documentaries, things like that. Maybe work with people in the sense of, therapy or something like that. Because I do love to talk to people, and I do like to connect with people. Yeah, I guess any number of those things I would do.
Got it. All right. Thank you. Sounds like we're toward the end. Bradley, that was awesome. I'm personally very inspired by the work you showed. And so much of the work that many of us do is not as the word is fun, and it seems like you've been able to cultivate a client base and a variety of work and media that lets you do really fun work, varied work. So it's really cool to see that. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your time in the presentation and the Q&A session. Maybe we'll have you back in the future. Feel free to join the group and participate.
Thanks so much for having me. It was great to meet all you guys, and wish you the best of luck in any and everything that you're doing.